A new beginning. Jack shifted the last moving box from the truck to his new driveway, sweat trickling down his brow despite the cool spring air. The California sun filtered through neat lines of maple trees, casting dappled patterns onto the freshly mowed lawns that lined Meadow Lane. For months, Jack and his wife Emily had dreamed of this moment. A safe neighborhood, good schools for their son, Ben, and the kind of peaceful stability he'd craved after years of uncertainty. Their new home looked just like it had in the real estate listing: warm brick, wide bay windows, a white porch swing that creaked softly as the breeze caught it. Jack took a deep breath. Maybe, just maybe, this was it. The place their family could finally belong. Emily wandered out, arms full of kitchen supplies, and gave him a tired but hopeful smile. "We're really here, Jack." He grinned, feeling lighter for the first time in months. "Yeah, feels good, doesn't it?" In the distance, a lawnmower buzzed to life. A sprinkler spun in slow arcs, and somewhere a dog barked. Little details of suburban life he'd once taken for granted. Jack glanced over the neat hedge dividing their yard from the neighbors'. A man, late 40s maybe, with thinning hair and a pressed collared shirt, raked leaves with precise clipped movements. Jack decided this must be David, the neighbor Emily had mentioned when reading through the HOA rules. Hoping to make a friendly impression, Jack set down the moving box and called out, "Hey there! Beautiful day for yard work, huh?" He gave a short wave, willing himself to sound casual. David just glanced up, eyes moving across Jack and the open truck, expression unreadable. "Suppose so," he said, voice flat, before looking away and returning to his raking. Jack blinked, unsure. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he wasn't the chatty type. No harm in trying again later. Back inside, Ben was racing room to room with excitement, narrating imagined adventures to when crickets began their twilight chorus. Jack stood at the window and gazed down the neat, picture-perfect street. Behind each front door he imagined stories, ordinary joys and quiet hurts, rivalries he'd never guess at. He wondered about his own place in it all, but for the moment, he let himself believe in a future filled with hope, promise, and maybe, eventually, a sense of belonging. Signs of trouble. The first week in Meadow Lane drifted by in a haze of unpacking and new routines. On Saturday morning, Jack rose early, hurrying down the stairs in stocking feet, eager to brew coffee before Emily and Ben woke up. He yawned as he stepped out to grab the morning paper, a ritual he'd missed after years of apartment living. But as he bent to retrieve it, Jack frowned. The paper was nowhere to be found. Maybe it hadn't been delivered yet? He shrugged, checking the mailbox instead. Inside, jammed tight, was a postcard with no return address. "Welcome to the neighborhood. Don't ruin it." The neat, blocky letters ran across the glossy image of the California coast. Jack stared at it, confused, feeling a prickle on the back of his neck. Some kind of joke? Maybe a weird tradition. He tucked the card into his robe pocket and tried to shake off the unease. By midday, Emily was wrestling with stubborn Wi-Fi, and Ben was running up and down the hallway in his superhero pajamas. Jack dragged boxes from the garage into the kitchen. He noticed the side door, just fixed by the movers, didn't quite lock. Frowning, he knelt to inspect the latch. It looked almost forced, as if someone had tampered with it. Was it the movers, or just old hardware? As evening settled, another odd thing. The trash cans, which Jack had rolled to the curb that morning, now lay tipped over, their contents spilling into the street. Jack sighed, picking up half-crumpled boxes and loose papers. From across the street, a pair of eyes watched, an older woman watering her begonias, lips pursed in neighborhood prank. The laughter in the group stopped short. David's gaze sharpened. We like things quiet around here. People who push boundaries never last. Just ask the last guy who owned your house. Jack forced a smile, but his hand shook, and the conversation drifted away like smoke. He noticed none of the group ate a single brownie. That night, lying beside Emily under crisp new sheets, Jack replayed the day in his mind. The lost newspaper, the jammed door, the spilled garbage, small things, but together they weighed heavy. Maybe I'm reading into it, he whispered. But does it feel like people don't want us here? Emily turned to him, face soft in the dim light. Maybe they're just set in their ways. Give it time. As moonlight spilled through the bedroom window, Jack focused on the ceiling's familiar cracks and wondered what, exactly, he was trying to build here, and whether the ground beneath was as solid as he'd hoped. Fractured connections. By week 2, the unsettled feeling had dug in its heels. Jack noticed it first at work, a sideways comment here, a lingering stare there. On Monday, he walked into the break room at McCready & Sons, coffee in hand, to find a pair of colleagues chatting in hushed voices by the window. Their conversation skidded to a halt when he entered. "Morning," Jack offered, but they barely glanced up. He busied himself by the coffee pot, pretending not to notice. Frank, the project manager, always good-natured, always the first to make a joke, barely nodded. "Didn't realize you'd moved out this way, Jack," he said, voice a little too careful. "Yeah, just a couple weeks now, trying to get settled," Jack replied, forcing a smile. Frank exchanged a glance with the woman next to him. "I hear Meadow Lane's tight-knit. Folks there remember everything." Jack blinked. "I guess so." It wasn't just paranoia now. Something was circulating. At lunch, his boss left him off the email chain for a major client meeting. In the hallway, someone whispered his name, half laughed, then fell silent as he walked by. By the time he got home, Jack's mood was brittle. He found Emily on the porch, be listening. "I haven't done anything except try to be friendly," Jack snapped, harsher than he meant to. "These people, Emily, it's like they decided before we even got here." A bead of silence stretched between them. Jack watched as Emily crossed her arms, pulling her cardigan tighter. The porch felt colder than it should. Inside, the tension simmered through dinner. Ben picked at his chicken nuggets, asking if he could eat in his room. Emily let him, out of character but too tired to protest. Later, while Jack cleaned up, he heard the distant rumble of David's mower, the mechanical whine stretching into dusk. The sound grated on Jack's nerves, a mundane reminder that nothing, it seemed, was normal here. That night, lying in bed, Emily stared at the ceiling. "Maybe we should just keep to ourselves for a while," she said quietly. "Let people come to us if they want to." Jack didn't answer right away. He gazed at the soft shadows on the bedroom wall, frustration and helplessness mixing in his gut. He realized, with a sudden pang, that the fresh start he'd promised was quickly unraveling. Not just outside their walls, but within. In the darkness, Jack reached for Emily's hand. "We'll figure it out," he whispered, as much a promise to himself as to her. But sleep, when it finally came, was restless and thin. And in his dreams, the walls of the house seemed a little closer, the shadows outside a little darker. The source of envy. Thursday brought with it a rare burst of sunshine after days of muted gray. Jack tried to harness some of that energy, rolling up his shirt sleeves and tackling a backlog of emails with forced optimism. But optimism was running short. His team's group chat buzzed with inside jokes he wasn't copied on. And when he finally clicked send on his project update, the only reply was a curt received. By noon, he'd had enough of staring at screens. He wandered out front to fetch the empty garbage bins. Just as he stooped to grab the blue recycle container, a voice drifted from next door. David stood in his drive, not-so-subtle reminder that he was the outsider. "I'll take care of it," he said, voice flat. David shrugged and let the silence linger. Then, with a conspiratorial tone, "You know, people on this block value peace and quiet. Some folks make the mistake of drawing too much attention to themselves. Never ends well." Jack faked a casual shrug, but his stomach twisted. He recognized a warning when he heard one. That evening, Emily pressed him for details after dinner. "You're sure he's behind this? The rumors at work. Kids picking on Ben." Jack stared out the window at the sunset washing pastel streaks across the sky. "It's too much of a coincidence, Em. I heard him talking to Mrs. Grant. He's got her ear, and probably half the blocks, too. Every time I think we're making progress, something else happens." She squeezed his hand across the table. "We can't confront him outright, not without proof." But Jack's patience was thinning. Later that night, when the house had settled and Ben was safely asleep, Jack sat at his laptop searching the neighborhood forums, HOA records, anything. Every thread about community events, every photo posted by David, Jack clicked through it all. The pattern was there. Any neighbor who'd spoken out, disagreed, or failed to fit in seemed to quietly vanish, property on the market within months. He dug deeper, reading online reviews for David's landscaping business. Buried beneath glowing recommendations were a few anonymous complaints, bullying, intimidation, under-the-table threats, all suspiciously outnumbered and outvoted by five-star raves. Jack felt the slow creep of something dark and rotten beneath the well-trimmed lawns and neatly swept sidewalks. The next day, Jack decided to try his own approach. He stayed home on the pretense of waiting for the internet technician, but really to observe. Sure enough, David made his rounds, a quick chat with the mail carrier, another with the couple across the street, a practiced performance of neighborliness, and always those flickers of knowing glances, the way people's faces tightened when Jack appeared. That afternoon, Jack's boss it all. Beneath the friendly surface of Meadow Lane, envy and old grudges simmered, weaponized by a neighbor who wore civility like a mask. Jack closed the door with more force than necessary. The fracture lines weren't just in his job or even his family. They ran right through the heart of this so-called community, and if he didn't act soon, he feared they would never heal. Silent resistance. Jack had never thought of himself as cunning, resourceful perhaps. He could fix a leaky faucet or wrangle a stubborn spreadsheet. But what unfolded in the taut, uneasy days after the silent war began required something different, something colder, more calculating. He started quietly, unnoticed. Sitting at the kitchen island late into the night, Jack pored over public records, trawling county websites for property transfers and digging through city council minutes. The soft glow of the laptop was the only light in the dark kitchen, the silence broken only by the whir of the refrigerator and the anxious tapping of his own fingers. David Wexler. Jack committed the name to memory as he clicked through old HOA bulletins and newsletters. David's signature recurred everywhere: fundraising galas, welcome committees, block association drives. In every photo, David's smile was bright, his handshake firm. But beneath the gloss, Jack saw the pattern: disappearances, sudden property listings, polite but chilly farewells that followed anyone who crossed a line. Neighbors he had never met but who left fast, without leaving much of a mark. On a hunch, Jack called a realtor from the next county, pretending to need info on Meadow Lane's turnover rates. "Seems like a popular street," he said, voice casual. "Any idea why folks move in and out so often?" A pause, then a laugh, thin, almost apologetic. "It's a nice place, sure, but the HOA can be particular. Most folks get along. The ones who don't, well, it's not always a good fit." Jack closed his notebook feeling both validated and unsettled. The next day, he watched David do his rounds again, a clipboard sometimes in hand, a dog leash the next. He bided his time, waiting for the right moment. When David stepped out to water his azaleas, Jack slipped into teenager, tagging fences at the far end of Meadow Lane. The article, fawning in tone, credited David's keen vigilance and willingness to confront problems directly. But Jack's eyes caught on a single curt sentence spoken by the teen's mother, nestled near the end. "He's not the hero you all think. Some problems he makes himself." Just to be sure, Jack looked up the family. They'd sold within 2 months, no forwarding address. As the weeks slid by, Jack moved from angry brooding to quiet observation. He logged every odd event: the strange tire tracks left near his garage, the whispering neighbor kids, the way people avoided eye contact at the mailbox. He noted David's routines, the cars that came and went. He even tracked David's post on the neighborhood social site, where a routine condolence or helpful warning often masked a subtle threat. His own escalation came slowly. A return of mail he knew belonged to David, a question posed innocently at a block association meeting about neighborhood security, seeing who would flinch. He studied David's reactions, waiting for the mask to slip. One night, Jack found Emily waiting for him in the living room, eyes shadowed by worry. "You've changed since we moved here," she said softly. "You're always watching, never really home." He sat beside her, searching for the right words. "I just need to know who we're dealing with, Em. I promised I'd keep us safe. I didn't know that would mean this." She reached for his hand. "Let's just promise not to become what we hate, okay?" Jack nodded. He wanted her to believe it, to trust that whatever he was doing was for them. But as she drifted off to bed, and Jack again sat beneath the cold glow of the laptop screen, he feared that in meeting David head-on, he might be learning the cost of silent resistance, slow erosion of trust and of self. Cracks in the surface. Autumn arrived in Meadow Lane quietly, slipping cold fingers through the yellowing leaves and painting the mornings with mist. The neighborhood looked as picture-perfect as ever. Tidy yards, wreaths on front doors, pumpkins perched on porches. But Jack could sense the iron beneath the charm. No one but Jack. As Jack set up a table with Emily, he heard a whisper of his own name nearby. When he turned, a couple of moms, faces half familiar, looked away quickly. One of them, a woman with sharp features and a sunflower apron, stuffed an envelope into her purse and moved closer when Jack stepped back. "Hi, you must be Jack," she said in a low voice, glancing over her shoulder. "Carolyn. My husband and I just moved in 2 blocks over." Familiar story. The welcome committee makes it clear who's in charge. Jack blinked, unsure what to say. Carolyn leaned in, her words tumbling fast. "Don't let them run you off. They tried with us too. It's all—" She dropped her voice even lower, smoke and mirrors. "The louder they smile, the more you know to watch your back." She straightened, cleared her throat, and slipped away, leaving Jack staring after her with a strange mix of relief and dread. Later, as dusk gathered, Jack strolled outside to find Ben on the swings, alone. The other kids had clumped together in tight circles, talking in rapid, secretive whispers. Jack's heart ached for his son. Ben's shoulders slumped, his shoe scraping the mulch. Jack sat on the next swing over. "You making any friends, buddy?" Ben shrugged. "Not really. Some kids say we won't stay." He looked up, face solemn. "Are we going to stay?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "We'll stay as long as we need to. No one gets to decide for us." It was only later, carrying the folding tables back to the car, that Jack saw David watching from across the lot, expression impassive. Their eyes met, and for a moment Jack thought he glimpsed a flicker of surprise, distaste, maybe even worry in the other man's gaze. The veneer was cracking. Sunday brought more signs that the old alliances were growing restless. Emily received a casserole from Mrs. Grant with a clipped note. "Hope things are settling down." But the dish was cold and the handwriting stiff. On the neighborhood forum, Jack watched as new posts cropped up. Quiet, questioning, almost rebellious in their tone. Others were paying attention. Maybe Carolyn's arrival had started. Lane might emerge, no longer able to hide in shadow. Gathering storm. The Harvest Festival had scattered more than just cookie crumbs and cider cups across Meadow Lane. It had sown fresh seeds of defiance. The mood, already brittle, grew taut as the days rolled by. Jack felt it everywhere, in the way people lingered a little longer on front lawns, talking in low voices, in the sometimes furtive, sometimes brazen glances exchanged when David passed. The perfect surface of the neighborhood, once so carefully maintained, showed hairline cracks that threatened to splinter wide open. Jack started noticing small acts of resistance. One morning, bright yellow flyers appeared taped to lampposts. "Let's make Meadow Lane home for everyone. Join the HOA meeting this Friday night." They were unsigned. Jack, on his way to the bus stop with Ben, watched Mrs. Grant hesitate, then snatch one down and shove it into her purse, her eyes scanning the street. David's car crept by a moment later, and Jack met his gaze with calm defiance. At work, Jack found a newfound confidence in his voice. When Frank asked about Meadow Lane, Jack replied lightly, "It's not perfect, but we're starting to find our people." To his surprise, Frank smiled. "That's all you can hope for, right?" The unspoken judgment was gone. The web of whispers that had isolated Jack seemed to weaken. At home, Emily and Ben changed too. Emily grew bolder, chatting with Carolyn at the park, stopping to greet neighbors. Ben, still the outsider at school, became something of an observer, quiet but keen-eyed. One afternoon he came home with a handful of crumpled flyers, grinning. "We put them everywhere, Dad, even in the teacher's lounge." That same evening, Jack's doorbell rang, a rare sound these days. He found Carolyn on the porch, eyes bright and urgent. "It's working," she whispered. "People are talking. I think even Mrs. Grant might show up Friday." Behind her, across the street, David stood on his driveway beneath the madly spinning porch light, pretending to check his mailbox. He watched them, jaw tight. His voice oily smooth as he called the meeting to order. But each time he tried to steer the agenda, hands shot up, objections, questions, demands for clarity. Carolyn read out the bylaws, citing where the rules had been bent or ignored. Jim shared his story of endless inspections. Lisa spoke for the new families, trembling but firm. Jack at the end stood and said,
"We came here for a sense of belonging, not fear."
A hush fell. David, face flushed, tried to retake control, but the room no longer listened as it once had. Jack's heart pounded, but he forced himself to meet every gaze.
This neighborhood is all of us, not just one person or one family. If we act together, no one can push us out.
For a moment, silence. Then, one by one, neighbors nodded, murmured their assent. It was a tremulous, tentative victory. As people filed into the night, Jack felt a cautious hope take root. Emily squeezed his hand, her smile soft, proud. Outside, David lingered by his car, for once ignored by those passing him on the sidewalk. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, Meadow Lane felt less like a fortress and more like home. The aftermath. Morning on Meadow Lane dawned unusually quiet, as if the world itself awaited the outcome of last night's reckoning. A thin mist hugged the grass, blurring the neat edges of the lawns, lending everything an uncertain, otherworldly feel. Jack awoke before the alarm, nerves thrumming with memories of the meeting. He stared at the ceiling, listening for signs that the world had shifted. Footsteps in the hall, the hum of a neighbor's car, a voice muffled behind a closed window. The storm had broken, but what would settle in its wake? Downstairs, the kitchen was bathed in gray-gold light. Emily stood by the sink in her robe, coffee clutched in both hands. She looked up as Jack entered, a tentative smile touching her lips. "Could have gone worse, right?" she ventured. Jack managed a little laugh, pouring himself a mug. He watched the steam rise, thinking of David's tight smile, the way a few old guard neighbors had left the meeting early, whispering behind their hands.
I think it could have gone much worse,
he said,
but it felt like something broke loose.
For longer than usual, and his SUV remained in the driveway, collecting leaves. At noon, Jack spied David standing alone on his porch, surveying the street with a hard, assessing stare. The power he'd wielded so easily lingered, but its edge was dulled, chipped by the neighbors' collective resistance. The next HOA meeting was scheduled, this time with a demand for open nominations and votes for every post. Carolyn sent a group text. "Let's keep pushing. They can't ignore us now." As the days unfolded, small victories gathered momentum. Jim's fence repairs were suddenly approved. Lisa's party application, once denied on a technicality, received a formal welcome from the board. Even the playground was cleaned at last, not by just one volunteer, but by a rotating crew. Still, shadows lingered. Jack heard whispers, some of support, some of lingering suspicion. Emily found an anonymous note in their mailbox. "You'll ruin what made this street special." She read it, shrugged, and tossed it in the recycling. "Let them be afraid of change," she said. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Jack caught sight of David at the corner, talking to a few neighbors. His face was animated, voice low but intense. Whatever threats or warnings he issued now were met with skepticism, not deference. People were learning the truth. Later, as autumn deepened, Jack stood on his porch breathing the crisp air, listening to laughter from down the block. The weight that had pressed on his chest for months felt lighter. Emily stepped out beside him, wrapped in her sweater. "We're still outsiders," she murmured, "but for the first time, it feels like we belong anyway." Jack put his arm around her, watching children race bikes under golden red trees. The battle for Meadow Lane wasn't over, but the rules had changed. The neighborhood was awakening, and so were they. Inside, Ben's laughter rose above the quiet, not nervous this time, but honest and unburdened. For a moment, Jack let himself believe that what they'd risked had been worth it, that there was more than Survivor magazine and, sandwiched in the middle, a plain white envelope. He recognized the slanted handwriting even before he opened it. Inside was a single sentence. You wanted a fight. You got one. D. He read the words twice, then folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. For a moment, his breath caught. Old fears stirred, but he steeled himself and looked across the street. David's porch light was off, the curtains drawn, his silhouette barely visible through a sliver of the blinds. The next morning, Jack found the remnants of toilet paper streaming through the branches of the maple in their front yard. Emily stepped onto the porch, arms folded, eyebrow raised. "It's juvenile," she said, picking up a strand. "Almost desperate." Jack sighed. David hasn't given up. But their son Ben dashed outside in his pajamas, face bright. "It's like snow, Dad. Can I help clean up?" Jack smiled. Of course. They worked together, stacking the clumped paper, chatting with Jim and Carolyn when they stopped to lend a hand. What last year might have felt like a warning now felt more like a challenge they would shoulder together. Even as word spread about the prank, there was laughter, not fear. The spell of isolation had been broken. Days passed. Rumors swirled. David had filed a complaint with the HOA that he planned to run for president again, or perhaps leave the neighborhood entirely. Jack kept watch, but each time he saw David now, something was different. The man seemed diminished, his confident strut now a cautious shuffle. At the community center's weekend cleanup, David showed up late and offered a curt hello before melting away at the first sign of resistance. Where he'd once been the voice of authority, he now spoke, and barely anyone listened. The power had shifted. One afternoon, Ben came running up the walkway with a wide grin, a couple of neighbor kids at his side. "Dad, we're building a fort by the creek. You should see it." Jack crouched and looked into his son's eyes, searching for that sense of wariness that had haunted Ben for months, but it was gone. "I'd love to see it, buddy. Lead the way." As they trekked lane, not entirely, but sunlight touched places it never had before, and the warmth lingered long after laughter faded into night. For the first time, as Jack locked the door and watched the porch light cast its soft glow across his family's faces, he believed it wasn't just a victory over a neighbor. It was the beginning of something better. A future, bright and unpredictable, still theirs to make. Spring arrived on Meadow Lane with sudden, vibrant force, a riot of crocuses and daffodils pushing bravely through thawing soil, birds singing their insistent melodies from every budding branch. The air was alive with promise and something lighter, easier, woven into the rhythm of each day. Jack felt it like a breath he'd been holding for far too long, finally released. Gone was the knot of tension he'd carried in his chest. In its place grew a cautious optimism, an openness to possibility. The neighborhood had changed, and so had he. On a soft Sunday morning, Jack wandered outside with a steaming mug of coffee, his bare feet sinking into the dew-damp grass. Ben was already riding his bike along the cul-de-sac, shouting with laughter as he raced two other kids. A real pack now, bonded through snowball fights and fort building and small, fearless acts of rebellion. Emily, kneeling in the flower beds, wore a streak of dirt on her cheek and hummed along to the oldies on her phone radio. Across the street, someone was unloading boxes. A moving van, bright and new in the sunshine. Carolyn waved to the newcomers, offering directions and baskets of muffins. Jack saw it for what it was, the old welcome intertwined with something authentic. A handshake and a smile, yes, but also an unspoken message. You're truly welcome here, on your terms. He crossed over to introduce himself. The new neighbors, Ava and her wife Melanie, with a baby strapped to Melanie's chest, responded with warmth and gratitude. Ava asked slyly. Anything we should know about HOA politics? Jack grinned, meeting both their eyes. We run things together now. No one calls all the shots here anymore. You'll be fine. Inside, the neighbors volunteered for tasks, shared news, debated plans for a summer block party. There was disagreement at times over the color of the new playground or what to spend on the garden walk, but it was the lively, honest disagreement of people truly invested in a place they chose together. Later that spring, the neighborhood gathered for a potluck. Under strings of lights on a long row of folding tables spilling down the street, children darted between the grown-ups, the air tinged with grilled food and laughter. For the first time since their move, Jack caught himself watching the curve of twilight over the rooftops and felt uncomplicated contentment. He found Emily, slipping his arm around her waist as she smiled at something Ben said. Their son, animated, told ghost stories to a group of friends clustered under a pop-up tent. Jack watched, remembering their first anxious months here, how it felt to stand on uncertain ground. But not anymore. The ground felt solid beneath his feet. A home, finally, planted strong and true. He leaned in, voice warm and sure, and told Emily, "We made it. We really did." In the soft dark, as lanterns flickered and voices drifted through open windows, Jack understood the gift they'd built, not just survival, but belonging, not just peace, but joy. New roots, spreading wide and deep, anchoring them for all the seasons to come. Passing the light. Midsummer draped Meadow Lane in honeyed gold, the evenings lingering well past dinner as the world slowed into a gentle ease. The wounds of the past had mostly scabbed over, but Jack knew some scars lingered just beneath the freshly painted shutters and flower baskets. They always would. Still, healing was visible on every stoop and sidewalk, a subtle but steady pulse. On one such evening, Jack and Emily sat on their front porch, glasses of chilled lemonade at hand, watching lightning bugs dance above the trim lawn. The warmth was both in the air and between them, their conversation lit with shared memories and the comfort of hard-won peace. A sudden commotion down the street caught their attention. Laughter, excited voices. Ben and his friends paraded by, carrying mason jars glowing with trapped fireflies. At these nights, Jack watched a new story emerge. Old wounds faded as new neighbors were folded into the fabric of the place. People asked for advice, swapped phone numbers, lent out tools, and offered to water summer gardens. Even Mrs. Grant, once so formal, let the children play hide and seek in her backyard. One evening, when the projector fizzled out, conversation turned to the changes on Meadow Lane. "Remember how it used to be?" Lisa said, her eyes twinkling. "Afraid to plant the wrong-colored tulips or leave the trash bins out too long." Jack smiled, a touch rueful. "Sometimes I still half expect a critical note in the mailbox." But it was Melanie who spoke what many felt. "You could have left, but you stayed. You gave us the space to be brave, too." There was a quiet ripple of agreement. Jack felt a flush of humility. He hadn't meant to lead, only to survive. Yet somehow, by refusing to be pushed out, he had pressed the whole street forward. Later, as the gathering dispersed and the air cooled, Ava approached Jack. "You set a light in the window for us. You know that, right?" she said. "When we were deciding where to move, we almost gave up. But the tire swing and the smiles, we thought, maybe we'll belong. You made it true." Jack was touched deeper than he expected. He thought of all the hands that had helped, Emily's steadiness, Carolyn's courage, even Ben's quiet optimism. He'd simply carried the lantern a while, that was all. Back inside, Jack tucked Ben into bed, the boy's hair damp from the night air. "Why do the neighbors come to our house so much now, Dad?" Ben asked. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, smiling. Because it feels safe, buddy. Because it feels like home. By the window, the soft light of the porch lantern spilled onto the lawn, just as it had on the night Jack and his family first arrived, lonely and uncertain. Now, its glow was a signal, a promise renewed with each sunset. Here you are wanted. Here you will be seen. Here you will never stand alone. And so the lane carried on through the summer. Not perfect, but real. Welcome for birds, bees, and neighbors alike. The swing on the big oak tree out back had new ropes, replaced 3 times since Jack first hung it for Ben. One morning in early June, a moving van rumbled in front of number 16. Jack, habitually filling his coffee mug before breakfast, saw the young couple standing by the curb, their faces a mix of hope and anxiety, hands wrapped around each other's. He smiled. He remembered that feeling, the uncertainty, the desperate wish for an easy start. He stepped outside, crossed the street, and extended a hand. "Welcome," he said, voice warm and steady. "I'm Jack from number 12. Let me know if you need anything, or if you just need a friend." The newcomers, Lindsay and Arturo, relaxed visibly. Within minutes, Carolyn, now a grandmother herself, arrived with muffins, and Ava, whose toddler had grown into a fearless grade schooler, promised to organize a welcome party. A few teens, Ben's old friends now grown, came by to offer help with boxes. Later that day, as Jack watered the wildflowers and Emily pruned the roses, they watched Lindsay and Arturo be folded into the ritual of acceptance and community. Gone were the days of silent stares and icy divisions. Here were nights of shared laughter, borrowed sugar, and porch lights burning late in case a neighbor ever needed help. At twilight, Jack sat on the porch steps, feeling the warmth of the house behind him. He remembered all that had come before, the fear, the sleepless nights, the way voices used to hush at his approach. And he thought of the courage it had taken, not just from him, but from Emily, from Ben, from all the neighbors who had stood up and chosen something better. "You ever wonder," Emily teased, joining him with a mug of her own, "what would have happened if we'd moved somewhere else?" He chuckled. "I think we would have found our way, because we had to. But I'm not sure anywhere else would have become home quite the way this has." They sat together as the street came alive with night sounds, crickets, the soft patter of feet, a burst of guitar from Ava's house down the block.